Hi everyone, welcome. This video we're going to talk a bit about some of the psychology related to police investigations. Uh, Much of the content in the slides that are going to be presented in this video comes from Joanna Posel's textbook, Forensic Psychology, the 6th edition. So what we're going to talk about in this video, we're going to talk about confessions. Confessions, so where a suspect confesses to committing an offense. It's probably the most valuable tool that the police and the prosecution have. So we'll talk a bit about that. We'll talk about different models, two main models of interrogation and interview. So when the police are interviewing or interrogating a suspect, so somebody suspected of committing an offense, what are the two main models that are used? We're going to talk about false confessions. We're going to talk about profiling, criminal profiling. So that you hear a lot about that in the media, in podcasts and on shows, and this idea of being a criminal profile. So we'll look at a little bit about that and talk about some of the reality related to that. And we're going to talk about the Mr. Big technique, which is a technique that's mostly used in Canada. It is used sometimes in other countries, but Canada is known for it. So this is a method of really using psychology to extract a confession from a suspect. So we'll talk about that. So as I mentioned, confession is very powerful. So if somebody's admitting to committing a crime, yes, I did it. This is what I did. It really, in many cases, if it's a truthful confession, and it's been obtained with the proper procedure, it's very powerful. The Crown Prosecutor presents it. Look, we have this person's admitted to doing it. It can make things easier for the court. And it's generally in North America, using one of the models we're going to talk about here in a second, that is the goal. The goal is to get the person to confess to the crime. So if you've ever watched any YouTube videos or any documentaries around police interrogating somebody, that usually is what you see. We need to get them to say it. We need to get them to admit to the offense. And this is where there's a lot of psychology applied. So you have somebody who's committed an offense. Of course, they're going to be reluctant to admitting to any of the details or admitting to the offense because that's going to impact their lives. So a lot of the techniques, either implicit or explicit, are really rooted in psychology to persuade this person to admit to the information that the police want to hear. Historically, obtaining confessions was physically coercive, so they would beat a confession out of somebody, and that was really accepted by society up until 30, 40 years ago. Now you see it as being more psychologically coercive. So as a society now, we don't approve or accept the police using physical means to extract a confession. It's illegal now. But for many years in our society, and it's still used in lots of other societies, we accepted it as a society. We accepted the police's job was tough. Criminals are bad people, so therefore police could use whatever means necessary in order to obtain the confession. But now, and this isn't without controversy either, being psychologically coercive. So we're going to talk a bit more about that. It is accepted in our society that police can lie to a suspect. It's not illegal. They can mislead, they can lie about evidence that they have in order to obtain that. So it's an ethical debate and something for you to think about. Is that okay? Is it okay for police to lie? So yeah, I don't know the answer to that, but it's an ethical debate. That's something you might want to think about. And again, as a society, historically and currently, we accept that, yeah, you're going to have to use some of these tactics in order to obtain a confession. But as we go through this discussion and through this video, just think about that. What are we willing to accept? Is it okay? It's not easy. It's messy. this whole idea of somebody committing an offense, and then how do the police get that information that they need. So think about that as we go through this. So the main model of interrogation that's used in North America, it's slowly changing, but the main model that has been used and is currently used is called the Reid model of interrogation. There's three kind of broad stages, I guess. You gather that evidence. So before you bring somebody in for questioning, you need to have some evidence. You need to have some proof that this person is connected. So that evidence comes from that preliminary investigation before you even talk to the person. So are there witnesses? Is there physical evidence? What do you have? Is there evidence kind of gathered by technology that that maybe puts that person at the scene, or there's some evidence that this person is somehow connected or they're somehow involved in this offense? And then you conduct a non-accusatorial interview. So this is the chit chat. So again, if you've watched these things online, in documentaries, this sort of thing, it often starts with a friendly chit chat. To build some rapport, make that suspect comfortable. Maybe ask them general questions and not accusing them of anything. So and then maybe try to develop some themes. So why do you think this would have happened, or what could have happened, or if somebody were to have done this, what might be the reasons? So it's done with more of that sort of friendly information gathering tone and less accusatorial. And then it switches to accusing them of the crime. So we think you did it. Here's the evidence that suggests that you did it. And then it follows 9 stages, which I'm going to show you here in a second. So the Reid model, when we get into that accusatorial stage, then follow these 9 steps. So the first one is suggesting that the person did it. So look, we have this evidence, we believe that you did it. Then make some suggestions as to why. So say, for example, there was a theft occurred. So say a theft in a business occurred. Somebody stole some money out of the safe of the store. So we'll use the name Sam. We'll bring Sam in, say, Sam, we have evidence, we believe that you took the money out of the safe. So think of that from that emotional, psychological point of view. How's that person going to feel? Remember, you started with that friendlier chit chat. Then you say, look, we believe you're the only one who could have done this. You're the only one here. We have you on camera near the safe. Your fingerprints are found on the safe. We believe you did it. Then you're going to develop some themes around that. So, Sam, I get it. Times are tough. The safe was open. I mean, anybody in your circumstances would have done the same thing. Then, of course, Sam is going to say, no, look, I would never steal. That wasn't me. I was by the safe, but I didn't take the money. You're going to interrupt those because you're going to interrupt that sort of thought process, that cognitive process whereby they're developing, some excuses, I guess. Sam, we know you did it. We have your fingerprints. You're on video. You did it. Sam continues to defend himself. No, I would never do that. I would never do that. Look, we have you. Anybody in the same situation would have done the same thing, but we do know that you were there. There's no other explanation for your fingerprints being there. Oftentimes, when we get into this cognitive distortion, all of us, particularly if you're somebody who's now being questioned by the police for an offense, you're going to go off, you're going to dissociate a little bit, you're going to start thinking about other things. So again, you may have seen this if you've watched videos on it. A person might just start zoning out or kind of spacing out. They're trying to kind of collect their thoughts, or they're being overwhelmed with emotion. They're trying to clarify their thinking. So you want to bring that person's attention back to you. So it's like, Sam, look at me. We know you did it. You're on video. In some cases, they may go passive. Again, as part of this dissociation, when you've been confronted with something very serious, you need to take that time to process, maybe regulate your emotions if you can, or you're being overwhelmed with emotions. So sometimes you'll see this passive mood, so whereby somebody may just stop answering questions. They may just kind of withdraw and go into themselves. So with this example, it may be something like, Sam, this isn't the first time I've had this conversation with somebody. You're not the first person to sit in this chair. You're looking at time for this. You might lose your job, or no, you are going to lose your job. You may lose your family. You may go to get, minimum sentence for this is 5 years. Tell me what I need to know. So bringing their attention back, okay? Then you're going to present an alternative question. So this is where you're kind of flipping the script a little bit again. So you may suggest another theme at this point as well that's part of this. So you may say, Sam, we know you took the money. We know that you're in financial difficulty. Is it possible that you just took the money to pay your rent and you were going to pay it back? So now you're giving them an out, right? You're giving them this alternative hypothesis, so then they may think, yeah, okay, yeah, I did take it, but yes, I was going to pay it back. Again, this bit manipulative, but that may get that person to say, yeah, I did take it. That other alternative question isn't important and isn't important to the court. It's about getting that statement. So then Sam says, yeah, you know what? I did take it, but my plan was to pay it back in a couple of weeks. I didn't think anybody was going to notice. So then you're going to get Sam to write this out. So you may get them to verbalize more details, but you'll see the police often want to get it in writing as soon as possible before that person starts changing their mind, that person starts, modifying the story or modifying the elements of the story. So these are the 9 steps. This is what is currently used mostly in North America. The RCMP just changed their protocol where it's a combination of this and the next model we're going to talk about here in a few minutes. Because there are some very serious ethical considerations related to this. And we'll talk a bit more about that in a minute, but just as you're kind of watching and listening to this, just think about that. What might those ethical considerations be? So some of the techniques that you're going to use, and they're similar to counseling techniques if you've ever done any kind of training in counseling, is using minimization and maximization. So as this person is telling you their story, you want to maybe minimize things. So just like that example, it's like, yeah, did you take it and you were going to pay it back? So then that's minimizing it a bit, right? So that's like suggesting that, okay, this isn't so bad. I did take it, but this was my intent, this was my plan. Or maximization, your maximization where you maybe exaggerate some things. So say, look, like you're looking at a lot of time. So maybe really the offense, is not, the sentence for the offense isn't that great, but you exaggerate that. You say, look, like, your name's going to be out there. You're never going to work in this town again. You're going to go away for a long time. Or they exaggerate the evidence. So again, this is think about that ethically. Is that okay to do that? You may say, Sam, we have you on video and we have your fingerprints. You may not have the video and you may not have the fingerprints. And again, in our society, we accept that. The courts accept that it's okay to mislead in order to get the confession. So, think about that ethically. Is that okay? So as I mentioned, the read is the most used. There's lots of methods. Lots of psychology involved in the interrogation interview of an individual. Rapport building, getting to know that person. Having sense of what's their personality like. Do they have some narcissistic traits? Are they quiet? Are they more of an introvert or an extrovert? Like, what's important to them? Is their public image important to them? Is their family important to them? Is their job and what's important to them? And then really focus on those techniques. Minimization, again, oftentimes is a good tactic. So make it appear not as serious, or provide rationale or reasons or excuses why the offense occurred. Again, depending on what you know about this individual and what their makeup is, is that fear going to work? Or is it better to kind of approach it in a more neutral way or a minimizing way? So research shows that the more thought and the more tactics used in a thoughtful way generally lead to more truthful confessions. And I say truthful confessions because, as we're going to talk about, there are false confessions as well. But the more thoughtful, the more evidence-based, the more specific techniques used in a thoughtful way often lead to more truthful confessions. So if you've been thinking about like what are the ethics around this Reid model? So this whole idea of looking through this lens of only trying to get a confession. And that's really a difference between an interview and an interrogation. An interrogation wants a confession. So again, if you've seen this on shows online, that's the goal. We got to get them to say it. We got to get their state. We got to get them to write this down. We got to get them to admit it. Then one of the big problems with that really is that are you going into it with a neutral lens? Are you really just trying to collect information on it, or are you just trying to obtain this confession? So this idea of investigator bias. So it's just like any kind of confirmation bias in research as well, where you're saying like, I'm going to ignore everything that doesn't lead me to my hypothesis. So if you're using this Reid model, you're looking through this lens of I just need to get a confession. I don't want to hear that, that there may be another reason that somebody else did it. I don't want to hear that, I wasn't even there. I just want the facts that lead to confirming the fact that I believe you did it. So that can be very dangerous if this person actually didn't do it. And we'll talk a bit more about this when we talk about false confessions. But if the only thing that you're focused on is getting that confession, you may ignore other relevant information that can assist in the investigation. And this idea of deception detection, so there's going to be another video on deception, that knowing for certain if somebody is lying or misleading is pretty tough. There are techniques which will be talked about in another video, but even with using techniques, it's about 50-50. We don't always know. One of the best indicators really for deception is just our feelings. How do we feel about it? But there are lots of techniques around deception detection, but it's very imperfect. And so then that leads to, these questions of like, how well trained is the investigator? Did they have that notion? Did their intuition tell them, okay, maybe this guy didn't do it, but I'm so focused on getting this confession that I ignore this. That's could be very problematic ethically. So there are procedural safeguards if somebody is being interviewed or interrogated by investigators. We know this, you hear it in the United States as one we're most common with because we see it in so much media. It's called the Miranda rights. You'll hear that in movies. Were they Mirandized? Did they get their Miranda rights? You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to an attorney. Yada yada yada. So there are those procedures. They're in Canada. They're in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms that we don't have to say anything if we're being investigated. We do have a right to have legal counsel there. Most people don't understand what that means. Most people don't really understand the implications of what if I say something, or what does it mean, like when is the appropriate time to get that legal advice. And if you think of just the prevalence of substance use and mental illness in the commission of offenses, are people of sort of clear mind to be able to understand this when really it's very legalistic. And again, sometimes police rush reading that. They'll say, "Do you understand?" But does that person? They may affirm it and say, "Yes, I do understand," but do they really understand what this means and the implications of this? So if we look at the Canadian version, so I think many of you have heard the United States version thousands of times in movies and shows. You may not have heard the Canadian version as much. So with the Canadian version, this is how it reads. So you're under arrest for blank, whatever the offense is. Do you understand? So do you understand that you're under arrest for this offense? You have the right to retain and instruct counsel without delay. That may not be clear to everybody. Those words are a bit confusing. It means you can have a lawyer. So you have the right to retain, to get, and talk to a lawyer. Retain, get, instruct, talk to a lawyer without delay, meaning now. So as you can see, if they arrest somebody who again is not of clear mind, for maybe they're under the influence of something, maybe they're some sort of mental distress, or they have a significant mental illness that's impairing their thinking, they may not understand that. We'll provide you with a lawyer referral service if you do not have your own lawyer. Anything you do say can and will be used as evidence. So literally anything you do say after they read this can be. So if you blurt something out, you say something that can be used against you, it will be used. Do you understand? Would you like to speak to a lawyer? So in many cases, I mean, I don't know, I don't have a lawyer on standby. I would say most of the population don't have a lawyer they can just call. There are lawyer referral services, so like through legal aid, police would have a list, have numbers to call. There may be and maybe in bigger towns or cities, there is somebody on standby all the time, 24 hours, who you can call. But as you can see, again, like think of yourself, maybe you are of sort of sound, clear thinking, but now you're under duress because you've just been arrested and the police are questioning you. So will you fully understand this? So again, that's something ethically to consider. And I'm not saying it's unethical, I'm just saying that you can see how it can be confusing for somebody to really fully understand their rights under the law. As I mentioned with the Reid model in particular, this idea of investigator bias. So if I've been collecting evidence, I've been watching you, I've been looking at this case, I'm bringing you in, I think you did it. So again, I just want evidence that kind of confirms my hypothesis that you did this. Yeah, I'm not going to beat this point up too much, but the fact is that it can be very biased. It can lead to frustration for the interviewer, the interrogator. It's like, just tell me. So then maybe they are using more of this psychological manipulation or this coercion. You're excluding. They may say something that exonerates a person, that says, look, I wasn't even there. It wasn't me. You're just going to ignore that and come back to it. So again, something to think about and consider with this Reid model. The main alternative to the Reid model is the PEACE model. So PEACE is an acronym that stands for planning and preparation, engaging, explain, account, closure, and evaluation. So planning and preparation is done before you bring that suspect in, you engage that person. So this is that rapport building, you're engaging them in conversation. And while you're engaging them in that conversation, you're also doing a bit of an assessment. So how are they reacting to you? What is, are we making a connection here? Are they talkative? Are they less talkative? How do they communicate? What's maybe their literacy level or their vocabulary like do they have the words? Are they able to kind of explain things in a clear way? Then you're going to ask them to explain what happened. So you could say, look, Sam, we have your fingerprints, we have you on video. Give me an explanation for this. Tell me about this. So really these open-ended questions. So again, similar to if you've ever taken a counseling course, similar to that. Explain how this could happen. Now tell me, what were you doing? Why, we have you on video. What were you doing there? So account for that evidence, explain and account for the evidence that's there. Like provide an explanation, account for, if you weren't there, where were you? So an accounting of the facts. So explain it and give me some details around this. Then you're going to bring it to a closure. Could be a confession. They could be maintaining that, no, I don't know anything about it. I don't know why my fingerprints were there. And then you evaluate that evidence. So it's more inquisitorial than accusatorial. So you're not saying, look, we know you did it, just admit it. You're saying, let's talk about this and let's gather kind of maybe more evidence. So then when you evaluate this person's statement, which would be the end of this, you may get them to kind of write out the details of everything you've talked about. You're going to analyze that. So similar as you would to, if you were doing some sort of research, you're going to analyze it and say, okay, so what makes sense? What doesn't make sense? What evidence, what did this person say that aligns with the evidence that we know? Then you may go back and do it again to get more explanation and more accounting of the facts. So the big difference really is this idea of accusing as opposed to an inquiry. So it's more it's more of an interview than an interrogation. Excuse me. And the stats show it's about the same. It's about the same, but that accusatorial as opposed to inquisitorial model. As I mentioned, the RCMP just recently changed their policies to include more of the Peace model as opposed to the Reid model. I mean, they're still using both, but their new procedures incorporate more of that interview as opposed to interrogation. And again, think about this idea of the accusatorial model, and which comes out of that Reid model. How that could affect you, and can lead to false confessions. So if maybe you're a person with maybe you have maybe intellectual disabilities, maybe you were under the influence of something and you just don't really remember what happened the night before. Maybe you've had bad experiences with the system and you think, I'm never going to get a fair chance. Maybe you're from a marginalized community. You're experiencing systemic racism. You think they're never going to believe me. Like, it doesn't matter what I say, I'm putting this on me. Maybe you have a criminal record. Maybe you've done the same thing 10 times before, but this time you didn't do it. But you believe they're never going to believe me. So some people will admit to things for various reasons. And we'll talk a bit about those various reasons. But coercive interrogations tend to bring out false confessions more. So just think of that pressure. So again, you've likely seen it in shows where there's that. I always picture, like in the southern U.S., you have that big sheriff kind of leaning over the table, pointing their finger at the person. You're going away for the rest of your life. Just tell us. And eventually the person just tells them what they want to hear to end that conversation. So there's different types of false confessions. So we typically think of a false confession as it's intentional. So somebody is saying that, they know that it's not true. In many cases, they don't really know the details. They'll just repeat back what they've heard. So again, that for those first steps of the read where they're laying out the evidence, they're just going to repeat, say, yeah, I did it, I did this, and they'll just repeat what they had said. It's not the same as a disputed or retracted confession. So disputed meaning that maybe the evidence disputes it, or witnesses, evidence from witnesses dispute it, or retracted meaning I'm taking this back. Like so maybe somebody does it for some of the reasons we're going to talk about. A couple of years later, they say, look, I actually didn't do it. I just said this because I was addicted to this substance, or they threatened me, or I felt threatened, or I got bad advice from a lawyer, whatever the case may be. And we don't know how many false confessions there are, because if somebody does it intentionally and they're fine with it, we don't know if it's false or not. And if somebody does it maybe as a result of a mental disorder, and they've come to believe that they actually did it when they didn't, we wouldn't know that. So I don't think it's a stretch to say that our prisons and jails have people in them who have made false confessions and have been convicted based on those false confessions. So we'll break it down into three types of false confessions: so voluntary, coerced, compliant, and coerced internalized, and we'll explain a little bit about what each of these three are. So the first one, it's voluntary. So just as that word voluntary means, so it could be somebody who just comes forward and says, "Yeah, I did it." So maybe they want to be famous. They want to be famous. They want to be linked to the crime. Some people will do it. Some people, particularly if they've been institutionalized, they have kind of a long criminal record. They just want to go. They want to go back. They feel they thrive better with the structure of an institution as opposed to being out in society. They may just admit to something in order to go back to jail. In some cases, particularly in organized crime, like some people will get paid to go give a false confession. So I do something, but I know this person wants to go back, or they're not functioning very well in society. So I'll give you $50,000. You go admit to this. Here are the details. You go do it. We'll look after you while you're inside. So there's been many cases of that happening as well. So to protect somebody else, so whether you're getting compensation for that, or maybe it's a family member and they did something and you want to protect them from going. So therefore, I'll come in and I'll come to it. There's coerced compliant. So this is a case. So I gave you the example of maybe somebody who they have a criminal record, they're from a marginalized community, they feel like I'm never going to get a fair shake here, they're going to pin this on me. Maybe they say, look, if you admit to it, so this is the promised reward thing. So if you admit to this, we'll talk to the judge, we'll talk to the Crown, we'll get you 5 years instead of 15 years. So you say, okay, well, they're going to pin this on me anyway, so I may as well admit to it and get the 5 years, when really they didn't do it. This is the most common type. There's examples in Canada of people, again, from communities that have suffered under systemic racism. So there's examples from First Nations communities where somebody just admitted to it because they're like, they're putting me away anyways, so I may as well try to lessen my sentence. I just want to sort of end this process. Term that I haven't used yet is remand. So the term remand, so if somebody is arrested and they are incarcerated until they go to court, that's known as remand. So remand warrant is when a judge says, hold this person until they appear at court. So you're not sentenced, it's just you are locked up until your court appearance. So that remand time is you're incarcerated, you're in prison, you're in maximum security usually for that remand time. So that can be a hard time on people, and because you're maximum security, and you're in maximum security because you haven't yet been sentenced, and so they haven't done the risk assessments and this sort of thing. So some people will admit to it just to get out of remand and to start their sentence. So some people will say, look, I'm on remand. And if you have a major case, so for example, something like a murder, you could be on remand for up to 2 or 3 years because the trial and the investigation is so long. So some people will admit to it just to kind of move on, get their sentence, because with the sentence you do have an end date. When it's ending, you can get involved in programming. You can get involved in treatment. You have more freedom within the institution typically. There's a coerced internalized. So this is when somebody comes to believe that they've done it. So they may not know for sure. So for example, maybe a person is under the influence of something. They've been drinking for 7 days and using lots of drugs. They blacked out for much of that time. They come in, they're experiencing withdrawal. They don't remember what happened the last few days. The police are laying this evidence out. It's like, yeah, you did this. you did this. And as that person is kind of experiencing, all of the emotions that go along with that, maybe they're experiencing symptoms of withdrawal. Maybe there's a psychological disorder present as well. So they come to believe that they actually did it when they didn't do it. So this isn't necessarily a false confession in the fact that I'm just going to say this to get it over with, or I'm going to say this to get something out of it. They're saying it because they actually believe it. Because maybe, again, they don't remember, or maybe, yeah, I did something like that before, so maybe I actually did it this time. So that's what this coerced internalized is that they do believe that they actually did the offense. So false confessions lead to convictions because those confessions lead to any confession leads to conviction. So if you're standing before the court saying, yeah, I did it, or you give a statement to the police saying, yeah, I did it, again, that makes the job for the judge a lot easier. And again, like it's hard for us to think that for any of those types of false confessions, like why would somebody willingly do this? But again, we know people do it for that internalized reason. They come to believe that they did it. Really, just to end this process, it's just like, listen, I just want this to end. They're locking me up anyways, so I may as well confess to it. So it is hard. It often comes out later, and again, if you do a quick Google search, you'll see lots of evidence of that, whereby somebody will years later, maybe they've gotten some psychological treatment, they've had time to reflect on it, they'll come back a few years later and say, look, I gave this confession, but these are the reasons why. False confessions, they taint other evidence. So, for example, somebody comes forward, they give a false confession, they get convicted. The police aren't looking for anybody else. They believe that this was the person who did it. So if there is an actual offender, if there is actual evidence out there that could be gathered, nobody's gathering it because they believe that they got the person responsible for this. So there's consequences not just to the individual but to society and to the whole system by false confession. So this is why one of the ethical disputes around coercive interviewing and interrogation techniques is, are we performing this to get to the truth, or are we performing this to convict this person? They are different. So this is why this move to more interview, non-coercive, inquisitorial methods are becoming preferred. Okay, we'll move on. We'll talk about criminal profiling. So criminal profiling, again, because of media, everybody knows what criminal profiling is or has an idea what criminal profiling is. Many people get into forensic psychology, and I hear it all the time saying, I want to be a criminal profiler. Well, in Canada, there's not necessarily a degree you can take that makes you a criminal profiler. Criminal profilers come from the ranks of policing, so you would start out in policing and kind of work your way through internal, external training to become a profiler. So I do hear many people say, I want to go do this course or this degree or this whatever because I want to be a criminal profiler. Well, eventually you could, but it's more about becoming a police member and then kind of working your way through to that. So we do know what profiling is. It was started by the FBI in the US, where it's like looking at different aspects of individuals, and that has now expanded to environmental as well. And technological is probably the biggest one used now. And really to kind of get an understanding of who is the type of person who might have done this. So like what personality characteristics, what behavioral characteristics, what demographic or sociological characteristics might this offender or perpetrator possess, which then can lead the direction of the investigation. Excuse me. So I'll just speak to a couple of these points here. So we talk about the seriousness of the threat. So if that profile indicates, okay, this person is a serial offender, they are going to do it again, or we believe they're going to do it again, or maybe we look and we see, okay, this is their preferred victim. So maybe we want to put a warning out saying that, okay, look, this person is likely to offend on maybe this area or this group of people. Is to help provide advice. So when those interviews are happening, so if you get a sense of look, this is what the personality is. So this person is a narcissist. They want to talk about themselves. They want the focus to be on them. They think they're smarter than you. Then if this is a profile, they arrest the suspect, then the interrogators, if they have this profile, then that can help them kind of navigate that discussion and know what to focus on in that discussion. Yeah, and also that same advice can go to the Crown prosecutors. So the Crown prosecutors, again, this person is likely to react when confronted. They're likely to react angrily when confronted. So that may be a tactic that they use if they want this defendant to kind of demonstrate anger in front of the jury. Then that might be something that the lawyers, the Crown prosecutors, will use in their examination. So criminal profile, even though as we know today, it was started by the FBI, it was used, but Jack the Ripper case. So I don't know if you're familiar with that. It was East London. There was a serial murderer who was murdering sex workers in East London, and so London Metropolitan Police at the time, they felt, based on the time of the offenses, the people who were being victimized, the area, that they came up with a bit of a profile of who the offender was. So yeah, we don't. Yeah. So anyways, bottom line, FBI created it. So the FBI was created in the U.S. I don't know if you know the history of the FBI, but the FBI was created as a national sort of policing support program, I guess is the best way to describe it. And in part it was because there was a lot of like local sheriffs and local police departments who were corrupt, particularly during the 60s. There was a lot of civil rights violations. So you'd have a kind of a systemically racist police department that was infringing on the rights of the people in that area. So the FBI was part of their mission was to provide a national standard. So it's not necessarily a national police force like we have in Canada with the RCMP. They do investigate federal crimes, but it's more of a kind of a federal, I guess, support in a way. And in some cases, they take over cases from local departments who may not have the resources, or if it's a federal offense and the jurisdiction falls with the FBI. So it's not exactly the same as the RCMP, which is a national police force. They do many of the same things, but you wouldn't see the FBI out patrolling like you would the RCMP. So when you're developing a criminal profile, there's two approaches: deductive and inductive. Talk about this for a minute. So deductive is when looking at that specific offender. So looking at what has this person done? So what has this person done in the past? So if we know this person, has a pattern. So look, they've, and that could be a behavioral pattern. It could be just a lifestyle or personality pattern as well. So we're taking it from like, what do we know? So it's taking it from the evidence, either of past or of that current offense. So what information do we have right now? So we have this information right now, and so how can we use that to build? So you have a starting point, this evidence. Inductive is more looking at like what have other similar people have done. So deductive is you're working more with facts. Inductive, you're saying, so if there's a particular offense, so say that I don't know, this particular offense happens in Wolfville, And so what do we know about Wolfville? Okay, so what do we know about other towns like Wolfville where this offense has occurred, and who did it in those towns? So then, therefore, maybe we can induce from that this may be the person or the type of person or has these traits that would be doing it here. Okay, so deductive, again, just to try to clarify that, is like, what evidence do we have? So what do we know either about the person or what evidence has been gathered from the crime scene? Inductive is taking sort of other, so it's almost like in research, almost like a thematic analysis in a way. It's like, what other evidence is out there that we can bring in and apply it to this case? So part of this inductive is again looking at, what are people doing? So we can break this down into organized and disorganized. So if we know, okay, so in this offense, or we know in other similar offenses, that a vehicle was used, or we know that it was this type of person, then we can apply that into this specific case. So we know, okay, so this happened in these 5 other cases. Some of our evidence is similar here, or I should say the offenses appear to be similar here. So therefore, we can say that this offender or the suspect, they're organized. They know what they're doing. They're not leaving clues behind, or maybe they are leaving. They're sending messages out on social media, these cryptic messages out on social media. They're likely to work a white collar job as opposed to a blue collar job. They're likely to have this level of education, and so on. Yeah, or is there evidence to suggest that they are disorganized, which means are they leaving lots of evidence around? Is there blood, and is there hair? Is there this biological evidence? Is there maybe less of a sort of thoughtful pattern? Did they not try to hide the crime? Was the victim, so in the case of maybe like serious offenses, was the victim or other evidence, was it out in public, or did they try to hide it in any way? So based on these models, based on these, again, the evidence from other crimes, again, think of it almost like a thematic analysis in research, where you're collecting all of this and then bringing it in and applying it. So this is a way of creating a profile. Not a lot of research. I mean, they're used. Profiling in and of, so the traditional profiling in and of itself, it just provides direction to the investigation. It's not necessarily valid. It's opinions. Some of it's evidence based on kind of other things in the evidence and this sort of thing. But we even know, like from the study of personality, that you may possess certain personality traits, which means you're maybe more likely to do this, but doesn't mean you have to do this. So, and most of us are so complicated, it's difficult to kind of pinpoint us and say for sure, okay, this person did this or this person's going to do this. So just even think of it like in, just as humans. Maybe you grow up in a home where there is addiction, substance abuse. So there's, profiling would say, yeah, you're more likely to abuse substances as an adult. That doesn't mean you're going to. There's lots of stories and research around, you have siblings who maybe grow up in a certain environment. So say in a home with addiction, you have one sibling who then becomes an alcoholic, the other person who never touches alcohol. And they both say, well, no wonder I'm like this because of how I grew up. So it's this ambiguity in the fact that, our history, our personality, just the makeup of who we are doesn't necessarily put us into a box. So this is one of the reasons this traditional criminal profiling, it's ambiguous, but it serves that purpose of giving direction. And giving says if you don't have anywhere to start with an investigation, you may have some evidence. You can't go off plan if you don't have a plan. So you need a plan to get started. it again, if you're going into it with that inquisitorial mindset, then you're open to other hypotheses, but you need a direction to get started. So again, the theory behind this is that, yeah, we do have, consistent behaviors, consistent traits, that, if you're an angry person, angry, violent person in many parts of your life, then yeah, you may commit an angry, violent offense. Some validity to it, but it's not a perfect science by any. I don't even know if I'm not even sure it's a science, to be honest, but it's a method of at least giving some direction to an investigation. Um, uh, I would hope that based on a profile that nobody would ever be convicted or based on a profile. We do assessments and these sort of things to give advice, as an expert witness, but based on a profile, it's not valid or reliable enough. So something that is more, I guess more valid and reliable is, or yeah, I would suggest that it's more than the traditional criminal profiling, is really looking at geographic profiling. And so with technology, this has really expanded much more than probably anybody has ever thought. You think of all the apps that you're using, that they're tracking your location. If you have Google Maps on your phone, it knows where you are all the time, as well as all the apps that you're sharing your location with. So people can, they can track. They would get a warrant for, tell me everybody who is in this area. So everybody who had a phone who was at this scene, they're gonna know. And sometimes it's not even just it's your phone. It could be a vehicle, any vehicle that vehicles have tracking location, any electronic device that you, like if you're wearing an Apple Watch, a Fitbit, a Garmin, any of those, they're tracking your location. So it can at least put the person there. Other elements of geographical profiling is, like, where did the offense occur? So, for example, if think of Acadia University. So if you have somebody who, I don't know, if say an older person, so say if an older person is I don't know, hanging around or walking through kind of the student housing area late at night. There's really no reason for them to be there unless, like their staff or something. There's really no reason for them to be there. Or there's a strange vehicle that's kind of in that neighborhood at late at night. There's really no reason for them to be there. So they can use geographical profiling and saying, like, look, like, who should be in this area? Like, what makes sense for somebody to be in this area? So if somebody is not in that, they can say, okay, here's likely. So if there's anybody else, then we can kind of include them in this direction that we're going. Yeah, so it's based on geography and demographics. And I believe it makes sense. Who's likely to be, I don't know, really. Maybe if there's a certain neighborhood that has a certain, demographic profile, who's likely to be in there, or be around in this area. Okay. So again, it's the use of technology has made this very accurate. Again, just through every electronic device that has some sort of tracking. So they use there's triangulation systems to kind of help pinpoint who is in this area. There's also a lot of facial recognition that's used in different systems that we have. They might even do something to pull, they may even pull like credit card, debit card records of a certain area to say, okay, who maybe bought something in here. Like they'll check the, cameras that are in businesses, gas stations, this sort of thing, to kind of say, like, who's likely to be in this area, and is there anybody outside of that? So this is all part of profiling. And again, the point of it is to kind of lead the investigation in a certain direction. So last investigation technique I want to talk about is the Mr. Big technique. So this is known to be used in Canada. It has been used in other countries, but it's kind of mostly known as a Canadian thing. And there's steps to this process. So essentially, if they have a suspect, but maybe they don't have enough evidence. We don't have enough evidence to get this person yet. We need them. Maybe they've been questioned by the police. They have physical evidence, but we just don't have enough. So then an undercover operation begins. So what this undercover operation looks like is they get somebody close to the suspect. So maybe that undercover operative would befriend this person somehow. Maybe they start working in the same place they work. They start going to the same gym this person goes to. They kind of infiltrate the social circles of this person and get close to the person. You see it a lot in correctional institutions where the undercover operative will come in, and of course nobody knows that they're undercover, and even the staff don't know, no one knows. But they'll come in as posing as another offender and be put in the same cell or the same area of the suspect that they want to get information from. So this person the undercover operative gets close to the suspect. They start building trust. So and sometimes this takes months and months. Sometimes it can happen quickly, but usually it takes a long time. So they start building trust. They start talking to them, say, yeah, they may reveal some things like, yeah, I'm in here because I committed these bank robberies, and the cops don't even, or I'm in here because of this one robbery, but the cops don't know that I did 10 of them. And but I'm just telling you because I trust you, and I know you're a good person, so keep this between us. And so they start revealing some things. They befriend the person. They build a rapport. They build a relationship. They build friendship. And then usually comes this the big meeting. So oftentimes, most of the time, this is associated with organized crime. So say I'm the undercover operative, suspect. I befriend the suspect at the gym. We become friends. We start working out together. I tell the target, the suspect, say like, look, like I'm involved with these guys out of Toronto, and they're making a ton of money, and they want me to do this robbery, and I need some help. Like, I mean, I don't know anybody here. I don't trust anybody. Do you want to come in on it? Like, we're gonna make a ton of money, and they're gonna know this person, this target, and the target's gonna say, yeah, yeah, I'm in. Let's do it. I'm with you. So then the undercover operative will say, like, look, but these guys out of Toronto, I know you, I trust you, but they don't know you, so you're gonna have to talk to them first. So they're coming to town next week. We're gonna go for dinner. We're gonna have a good time. So they want to meet you and get to know you before they bring you in on this job. And so then the people from Toronto, who are all other police, they come in. Maybe we'll go out for dinner, we have drinks, we have a good time, and maybe no business will be talked about. It's just rapport building. Maybe the next day or the week after, say, yeah, the guys from Toronto really like you. They just want to talk to you again about this. And so then at that meeting, they're going to say, look, like, we're bringing you in on this crime, on this job, but we need to know more about you. Like, can you tell us maybe about another time that you committed a robbery or you did something? Because we need to know more details before we bring you into our circle, or we let you join our gang, or whatever the case. And then because there's been so much rapport built up, and now this person, maybe they're using flattery, they're maybe giving the person gifts, there's dinners, maybe they've given them some money. It's like a bit of a retainer or something, and this person now wants in. They'll say, yeah, okay, well, no, I understand. So listen, I'll tell you about these other robberies or this murder I did that the police never got me on. And so then they reveal crimes that they've committed that they haven't been caught for. And there's the confession. So that's the Mr. Big technique. So it takes time. There's an undercover operation. They build rapport. They use persuasion, flattery, money, rewards to get this person to confess to either a specific crime or crimes that, yeah, a specific crime, and sometimes it's other crimes that they did that nobody knows about. And um, and you might think, like, who in the world would fall for this? But it is a technique, and there's lots of cases all the time where this is used. I know often every time I read about it, I think, I'm like, how in the world do they fall for this? But you think about it, if it's somebody who wants that praise, that social acceptance in this world, they're gonna say they're gonna tell them what they want. They're gonna, their ego is gonna be flattered. Again, the financial reward. So it is controversial. Again, is it a coerced confession? I don't know. It's still used a lot. And again, it's known as it's most prevalently used by the RCMP in Canada, and it is mostly related to organized crime. If you went on, did a YouTube search, you'll see lots of examples of it. There are videos out there of the big meeting. So when this person comes and it's like, the head of the mafia or the head of this organized crime or head of whatever, where the person just reveals things from their past that they haven't revealed before. So that's the Mr. Big technique. If you have any questions or thoughts or you need clarification on anything, please reach out to me by email. I'll be happy to connect with you over email or over Teams. Yeah, please let me know if you have any questions about what has been discussed in this video. Thank you.